Well, welcome to another episode of the Residential Developer Podcast. I'm your host. My name's Nathan Battershall, and today I want to talk about a really critical and key topic that I believe will set you up for your projects in 2026 and beyond if you adapt this into your thinking and into your mindset. And I want to talk about approval certainty versus approval speed. I want to talk about what experienced and skilled developers actually care about. And I want to talk about this topic, approval certainty versus approval speed, because I'm seeing more and more by someone who talks to and interacts with hundreds and hundreds of investors and developers passionate about property year in, year out, and having a company that's core business is to service and help and support these type of investors and developers, either guys that have got capital raising funds that do large developments on scale, and lots of them, down to builder developers, down to high wealth individuals with a passion for property doing projects, and then mums and dads who may want to just do a duplex on their site, keep one side, sell the other, or develop their site to sell one side, get rid of a mortgage. Those four different areas we tend to work in. I've just found that people either want one or the other. They want approval speed and they overlook approval certainty. And then you've got people that, for me, the experienced developers that understand the tension of approval speed versus approval certainty. And I want to talk into this today because I just think it's an epidemic that I think has come about the last probably 5-6 years in our industry. And I get it. We live in a world that's so fast now, so instant. Everything is quick. We want everything quick. And I think although it's good to get a lot of things quick, I think at times, and I think often we're finding that it's coming with its fair share of problems because people are overlooking certain elements. And I spoke about it last week on the podcast, talking about some of the mistakes that happen before you've even started a project on a site. But today I want to really drill down into approval certainty versus approval speed. And I think, very few people understand what actually makes a project fast. And I think that is what brings about this approval speed versus approval certainty. And I think a lot of people just think you need to smash through the feasibility, smash through the design, smash through the approval, smash through the build, and you make good money, and then you move on and you go again. But in a perfect world, that may happen, but it just does not work that way. Like I shared last episode, but you need to slow down to speed up. And a lot of people, they miss the feasibility part because they're just trying to smash through and they're just trying to move quickly, and then they've got a headache. They're trying to turn a project around that just was destined to fail from the start due to lack of planning, lack of understanding, lack of doing a proper feasibility. So this whole thing around speed, where has this obsession with speed come from? Because our world is rife with it. We live in an instant world now where we want everything instantly at our fingertips. With the speed of things like AI, with the speed of everything in our world, the fast food, everything's delivered now. You can order a book today and you'll get it tomorrow often. Everything is so fast and so speedy now, and even the different planning pathways, even state governments are talking about to speed up planning processes and all that sort of thing. Speed is in our psyche, it's in our thinking, it's in our mentality, and it leaks and it oozes out of us. And, it comes from so many different environments now. We talk about agents talking about you need to move quick. Brokers, you need to, agents will often say you need to get in quick, otherwise this site's going to be taken. This site won't be on for long. You're going to have to make a decision really quickly. There's 2 other people looking at it. Unfortunately, I can't hold it for you any longer. You got to move. And all of a sudden you're rushed into making decisions that you would not have otherwise made. And I think that can be extremely dangerous and extremely worrisome. And I think, then often you can get brokers that talk about you need to do it in this period of time, or you've got this period of time to do it, or, if it takes this much longer, you're paying this much more in interest. So there's this pressure and there's this speed, social media, forums, advice, even a lot of development courses. Everything's, pushing this whole mechanism of speed. But often, speed can be a false sense of economy, because what happens, speed often feels productive but often isn't. Often speed we think that it looks productive, but it often isn't. Like I shared last episode, speed often we think that it's productive, we think that it's working, but often it can be taking you right down a path that is not suitable, and leading you down a direction that is dangerous, or you may have to then pull up stumps and go all over again. I want to talk about speed to lodgement versus speed to approval versus speed to build. The danger can be often we want to speed. First and foremost, we want to speed to getting the site. And I've already talked last week about the dangers of that, so I don't want to go too much into that. I want to talk more from a planning and an approval point of view, because obviously over my career in this part of the process in planning and design, I've obviously seen a huge increase in, especially inexperienced investors and developers. They want everything yesterday. They want to rush and not take the time to get it right. And so, for me, it brings about then that, that speed to lodgement, speed to approval, then speed to build. But, one thing I've found is when you speed that process, and like I said, when you don't take the time to slow down early in the process, it often leads to re-lodgements later on. There's an old saying in New South Wales that about 80% of DAs don't get built. What do you reckon that is? Just let that one sink home. 80% of DAs in New South Wales don't get built. Now, we could say people can't get the funding, all these different things. The reality is they often don't get built because they don't stack up. I'll guarantee a large proportion of that 80% do not get built because they do not stack up. Now, a couple of critical reasons why they do not stack up. For me, I believe it is one of the most critical things of why things don't stack up. It is because people are so intent to move quickly that they don't take the time to pressure test the project to see, does it stack up? Does it work? And I think that's one of the critical things. People want to rush to do something quickly, only to realise they have to do a redesign and a resubmission because it doesn't work. Sometimes it could be that they're doing the complete wrong development because they just wanted to rush it. They just wanted to do a CDC, smash it out, rush it through, and then they run the numbers finally, and it doesn't work. I'm amazed the amount of people. I get it if you're a builder developer. We do a lot of work with builder developers, and I love working with builder developers. Often the great thing about a builder developer is they do tend to know their numbers very well, especially from a cost point of view. Not always a resale, but definitely from a costing point of view, they're very switched on in that space. And I'm amazed though the amount of high wealth individuals or people that will push ahead with an approval without getting some costings, without getting a builder locked in early in the piece to work closely with, or developing a partnership like I always talk about, your dream team, so that you can really pressure test the numbers to make sure that what you've designed, what you're planning to do actually stacks up, actually works. And then all of a sudden you get it all approved, and then you take it out to 5 builders, and then, oh no, we've got to reduce $400,000 from our duplex build. So then all of a sudden you've got to go and do a whole redesign. So the whole speed, I'm amazed, like people that wanted to skip waiting a couple of weeks after you've approved your drawings. They just want to go straight to approval to save themselves 2, 3, 4 weeks, than to go to a builder, get it priced up, okay, we need to shave it back a bit. And that's not a problem. It's so much easier to shave it back, the budget back and the design back at a early stage of the design process. But to then have a DA that's approved or a CDC that's approved to have to pare it all back and redesign it all, get the consultants all fully engaged in it and get it back in for approval. It's even worse for a DA, obviously, because it's longer in council. And so was it really worth it to speed through that process and to avoid those critical steps? I don't personally believe it is. For me, that's what approval speed really means. It's avoiding critical parts of testing the project and testing what's possible. And for me, that's what approval speed actually really means. Approval speed is often avoiding looking at critical steps of the approval process, of the design process, and testing and pressure testing that project. And so if that's what approval speed means, what about approval certainty? What does approval certainty really mean in the residential development space? And I think approval testing is actually knowing what will be approved and what will be possible before getting it approved. Okay? That's approval certainty. And I think a good developer, an experienced developer, understands that they want to develop certainty before speed. Now, yes, you want to do things efficiently, but I think switched on developers, and like I said, I can pick them a mile away. I can tell someone who's inexperienced because everything's go, 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 and that they haven't factored in key parts of the project. Whereas I find the switched on developers, often they'll take a little bit of time pricing something up, getting it all pressure tested and priced up once they're happy with the design. Often they'll then come back and say, look, we've had a look at it. I think we need to revert to a different sketch. We think we need to look at this. Happy to pay a little bit more money at a planning point of view just to look at that. Because they're a little bit more mature in it. They're a little bit more switched on with it. They understand that they'll avoid headaches later on and redesigns and resubmissions. Like I find a lot of my most experienced clients, we rarely ever had to do resubmissions, redesigns, and often they do take a little bit longer. And it's not due to laziness. It's not due to anything other than the fact that they understand that approval certainty as a hierarchy sits in front of approval speed, because they know that they can move the project forward and they don't have those delays and backward and forwards and pulling out, resubmitting, having to redesign and look at all those key important pieces. It's designing within the constraints instead of testing the boundaries. Often I get people that just want to push boundaries because we need to move it in. We need to get it into council. We need to get it approved, and so rush. Often you'll find the guys that are happy to test that don't want to test all the constraints. They want to work within the constraints and they want to make sure that they're building a project of certainty. You're then able to avoid RFIs from council. You're able to avoid variations because what's happened is they've done their feasibility correct, that they knew the constraints before they got the site and they ran their pressure tests, they ran their feasibility of the site against those constraints and didn't overinflate what could be achieved. And as a result, they can put a true planning application in that already mitigated those constraints, and it's stacked up. So they're able to submit an application to council and all of a sudden it can go through a bit quicker because it's been pressure tested, because they've developed more certainty over speed. And as a result of that certainty, it often helps them in the long run with a more switched on and better application anyway. And often, I think it's looking at things like, obviously, I'm a big advocate of CDC projects, but also I'm a massive advocate of DA projects too, because there's no hard and fast. When you're playing in this development space, there's advantages and disadvantages of each. And I love the CDC pathways. If you can, it's always handy to go down that path, but it doesn't always stack up and work well that way. I think there's always a good place for DA applications. And I think it's understanding, DA versus CDC timing reality. For example, I've seen CDC projects that, yes, they're able to fly through that project and they bought the site only through the lens of a CDC. But all of a sudden, that particular site, because they had to go CDC, they were constrained by things like, fill or cut or various different things, and then it impacted the buildability, but also the product was possibly not as good than if they went DA, and before you know it, they've actually slowed the project down. Yes, they sped it up from a planning point of view, but they slowed it down during the build then, due to, various factors that might have been constrained on the CDC, whereas the DA, there could have been a little bit more flexibility. There could have been a scope to do things slightly differently, and all of a sudden you're able to go down that path. We had a project where the client came to us and someone had designed a duplex CDC, really long block. I think it was like 16 metres wide, 17 metres wide, sorry, and it was quite long, maybe 50 odd metres long, and someone had designed this side-by-side duplex CDC, and they ran their numbers, ran their feasibility, and it just didn't stack up. And look, obviously I'm experienced in this space, so I can often look at a site and very quickly determine what's a better outcome, better option. The numbers just didn't work for a duplex on this site, and the particular demographic, I honestly believe that single like villas would be a better option, and it rightly so. It was a better option. That's what the market wanted. Even the agents backed it up. So, but what that meant that we'd have to forego a CDC and go down a DA pathway. So it was a slower pathway from a planning point of view. But I think in the long run, one, it made the numbers stack up. But two, I honestly believe it sped up the selling process, because that product, if there's not a market to buy that product at that price, if the market didn't want a duplex, it could be sitting on the market for quite a while to get the numbers they need to get, or they need to drop their price and lose money on a development. So taking the time to slow it down, to develop certainty, so that you can then push ahead, often enables you to win in the long run. And I think it's just looking at, like, we had a site in Ferry Meadow. Particular site, it was a site where the client had a brief. It was in Ferry Meadow, so north of Wollongong. And this particular site, the client had some very grand tastes, but a limited budget. And we told them early in the piece that we didn't believe that their budget was suitable. They wanted to push, go. Anyway. So look, there are times where you can argue with the client, but at the end of the day, it's their project, and it's like anything, you learn from your mistakes. But the client, in the end, they pushed ahead. They wanted to go with their design, although we, along the process, encouraged otherwise. Anyway, priced it up like we'd thought. It was quite over budget. So then we said, look, let's just slow down the process, not for slowing down's sake, but to get it right. The reality is, you want to make money out of this development, so we've got to get it right. So the beauty is then we're able to build that relationship with that builder. We're able to price it up, design it, make it sure it's buildable, price it up, hit all the things they wanted in the product, but also make sure it was within their budget, and obviously would make them money. So long story short, we designed this amazing buildable duplex. It was in their budget, and they sold one side, made terrific money, did really, really well. So that's an example of where someone unfortunately didn't get it right, but were able to rescue it early-ish in the piece. Luckily, they listened to us and were happy to get it priced up sort of before we got it approved. So after we'd done design development plans, before we'd even taken it to CDC construction drawings. So, for me, that was great because it just meant that, yes, they spent a little bit more money on design work, but it's a lot better than they didn't have to go and pay for new consultants and new CDC fees and all that side of it. So I think that's critical. But, for me, there's so many different mistakes that can happen in this approval speed pathway. And I think one big one is forcing speed. I think just forcing things to go quick for the sake of going quick is so risky. I see that so often where people just force speed. And by forcing speed, they overlook things, they don't test things, they don't get things quoted up by the builder at a design point of view. They just push, and then, or if it's a DA, they push and they don't listen to the fact that, hey, you've got a whole bunch of variations here. There's some of these we don't believe are going to be suitable. But the problem is they've had to force speed due to various problems that may have arisen in their acquisition or not running their numbers appropriately. So they're forcing speed. I think another mistake can be just rushing consultants, rushing all the moving pieces. And that's where mistakes come, where you're rushing consultants. And the problem is when you're rushing them, they're not taking the time to mitigate any risk, to take away any problems, to determine, there's this problem on a site. I've seen that in my career where mistakes often have arisen due to like forcing speed, rushing things that rather than building certainty to ensure a really good application, they just rush things and all of a sudden the stormwater's overlooked. They've overlooked some flood controls, or they've overlooked something in the DCP that relates to stormwater, or they've rushed over a certain aspect and missed critical parts of a planning stage from a consultant point of view. And I think, and then just another mistake I see often is just choosing different planning pathways for the wrong reasons. For example, just choosing CDC because it's fast. Not taking the time to realise, well, you can actually make another $400,000 by doing that DA and then reverse engineering your numbers. Or, to go down a DA for a couple of elements only to realise that you could have actually gone CDC there and got, you could have got an extra couple of 100 square metres of extra floor space. That market is all, people that are looking for a bit more space. They can't afford to buy a house, but they want to buy a duplex. So there's so many different critical things and there's so many mistakes that can arise from that. But look, I hope this episode's been really critical for you, because I honestly think that it's important to develop a mindset of approval certainty when you're doing your planning. So if you're looking to do a project this year or you're in the pipeline of planning your next project, develop a mindset of approval certainty over approval speed. Now, you still want to hold your consultants, your designers, your planners to account to be able to move things along in an efficient manner. You never want to work with someone who's just slow for the sake of slow. But what you want to do in your own planning, in your own way you're looking at things, don't rush. Take the time to look at things. Take the time to send the design to an agent. Get an idea of some resales. Get a couple of ideas. Don't be afraid to get a builder to look at something early in the piece, then go back to your numbers, run your numbers, make sure it works. Take that little bit of time. What's 3, 4, 5 weeks in being confident then and certain in your numbers when you go in for the application and making sure that it stacks up? And I think that's just a critical thing. And I've got just a little thought to leave you with. Again, this is just a thought, I believe, that can sum up this episode, something you can make your mantra when it comes to approval certainty versus approval speed in 2026. So just write this down or put it somewhere that's front and center of mind. It says the fastest projects are the ones that didn't need fixing. And I think that's critical. They're the fastest projects, the ones that do not need fixing. And I think when you have an approval mindset, that puts approval certainty ahead of approval speed. They're the projects that don't need fixing. So look, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. As usual, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next week.